The day my boss forced me to train my replacement was the exact moment I realized loyalty meant absolutely nothing in that building. Not hard work. Not late nights. Not sacrifice. Not 11 years of fixing everyone else's disasters while they collected bonuses I never saw. Nothing. And the worst part? He smiled while doing it. I still remember the way the office smelled that morning. Burnt coffee. Cheap cologne, printer ink. The same smell I'd walked into almost every day for over a decade. Except this time something felt set different the second I stepped off the elevator. People stopped talking when I walked by. Not completely. Just enough. Enough for me to notice. Enough for my stomach to tighten. Enough for me to understand something bad had already happened before I even sat down. I looked toward accounting. Melissa avoided eye contact. That alone scared me. Melissa knew everything before everyone. I checked my phone. No emails. No meeting alerts. Nothing. Then my office phone rang. Ethan wants to see you. No good morning, no explanation, just that Ethan Mercer, Senior Regional Director. The man who built his entire reputation on other people's work, mostly mine. I stood up slowly, pretending not to panic. The hallway to his office suddenly felt longer than usual. Every step sounded louder. Every person looked away too quickly. Deep down I already knew. You don't survive corporate America for 11 years without learning how to recognize the atmosphere before an execution. And this felt exactly like one. Ethan's office door was already open. He was sitting there with his sleeves rolled up pretending to look stressed, while scrolling through golf resorts on his laptop. Across from him sat a guy I'd never seen before. Young, maybe 26. Perfect haircut, perfect suit, perfect confidence, the kind of guy executives love because he still thinks overtime is impressive. Ethan looked up and smiled. Daniel, there he is. Come in, buddy. Buddy. Whenever management says buddy, your career is already bleeding out on the floor. I sat down. The younger guy stood up immediately and stuck out his hand. Kyle Brennan. Huge fan of your work here. Huge fan. I shook his hand anyway. Cold grip, sweaty palm, nervous good. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Daniel, Kyle's going to be joining the operations division. I waited, and we want you to help get him up to speed. Still waiting, then Ethan said the sentence that changed my life. He'll be taking over most of your responsibilities moving forward. There it was, not even hidden. Not even softened. Just a corporate bullet directly between the eyes. I stared at him. Most? Ethan folded his hands together. We're restructuring. Every employee on Earth knows that word, restructuring, the corporate version of a shallow grave. I looked at Kyle. He suddenly became very interested in the carpet, which meant he knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably accepted my job weeks ago. Ethan kept talking like this was normal. You've been incredible here, Daniel. Truly, but the company is evolving. We need fresh energy. Different perspectives. Fresh energy. Translation? Someone cheaper. Someone younger. Someone willing to work weekends for fake promises. I should have exploded right there, but something stopped me. Maybe instinct. Maybe survival. Or maybe it was the tiny blinking light on the digital recorder app. I'd started using months earlier, because Ethan had a habit. He lied, constantly, and 6 months before that meeting. After he denied approving a budget request he personally signed. I started recording every private conversation we had. Not because I planned revenge. Because I knew someday I might need proof. Turns out someday arrived faster than expected. I kept my face calm. So what exactly happens to me? Ethan gave me the same fake, sympathetic expression funeral directors use. You'll still have a role during the transition period. Transition period. Another corporate phrase. It means they already replaced you but want you to train the person before they throw you away. Kyle finally spoke. Honestly, man, I'm excited to learn from you. Ethan says you basically built this department. I looked directly at Ethan. For 1 second his smile twitched. Because he knew that was true. I did build the department. When I started there were 6 clients. When I walked into that office 11 years later, there were over 200. I missed birthdays for that company. I slept in airports. I worked through pneumonia. I answered calls during my mother's funeral, and now I was being replaced by a human LinkedIn profile. Ethan stood up. Meeting over, just like that. We'll need you to really help Kyle integrate quickly. Team player mentality. There it was, the insult. Not only was I losing my career, I was expected to participate in my own execution. I nodded slowly. Of course. Ethan smiled again, he actually looked relieved. That was the moment I understood something important. He expected me to leave quietly, he expected me to panic, cry, beg, apply elsewhere, disappear. What he didn't expect was patience. I walked out of his office and went straight to the bathroom, locked the stall, sat there staring at my phone. The recording had captured everything. Every word. I listened to it twice. Not because I needed proof. Because I needed motivation. I wanted to remember exactly how it felt. The humiliation. The disrespect. The casual betrayal, because pain fades. And I didn't want this one too. By lunch the rumors had already spread across the office. People suddenly acted overly nice. Which is worse than cruelty. Cruelty is honest. Pity isn't. Melissa from accounting stopped by my desk holding coffee. I'm sorry, she whispered. That confirmed everything. I asked her quietly. How long have they known? She hesitated. Too long. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of smiling in my face. 3 weeks of meetings. 3 weeks of fake compliments. 3 weeks while my replacement sat somewhere preparing to inherit my life. I thanked her for the coffee. Then I noticed something else. Kyle had been given the desk directly outside my office. Not temporary seating, permanent placement. They weren't even pretending anymore. Over the next few days, Ethan became almost cheerful around me. That's how narcissists work. Once they think they've won, they relax. He started forwarding me tasks with phrases like, have Kyle shadow you on this. Make sure Kyle understands the client structure. Walk Kyle through your vendor relationships. Your vendor relationships, the same relationships I spent years building. I smiled through all of it, and recorded everything. Every hallway conversation. Every closed-door meeting. Every careless comment, because the more confident Ethan became, the sloppier he got. One night around 8:30 p.m., after most employees had left, I heard Ethan arguing loudly inside his office. I recognized the other voice, Richard Halbrook, company CFO. I slowed my steps near the door, then I heard my name. He doesn't know yet, Ethan snapped. Silence. Then Richard said quietly, you better hope he never finds out about the numbers. Numbers, that word hit me instantly. Operations handled client logistics, which meant I saw enough financial movement to recognize patterns, and recently felt strange. Budgets disappearing. Vendors paid twice emergency transfers. At first I assumed incompetence. Now? I wasn't so sure. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Ethan kept talking. By the time anyone audits anything, I'll be gone. My heartbeat stopped. Richard lowered his voice too much after that. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. Offshore transfers. Quarterly adjustments. Fraud. Suddenly my replacement made perfect sense. They weren't restructuring. They were cleaning house before something exploded, and I was dangerous because I knew too much. I walked back to my office slowly, sat down, closed the door, then I opened every file I still had access to. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. Payments to vendors that didn't exist. Consulting invoices approved without documentation. Massive discrepancies hidden inside operational expenses. Millions. Not thousands, millions. My hands actually started shaking. This wasn't office politics. This was federal prison territory. And suddenly, I understood why Ethan looked so relaxed. He wasn't replacing me because I underperformed. He was replacing me because he needed someone inexperienced enough not to notice the theft. Kyle wasn't my replacement. He was a shield. A disposable idiot to absorb blame later. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. That night I copied everything down. Invoices, approvals, voice recordings, internal reports, every file I could legally access, not to leak, not yet, just insurance, because when corrupt people panic, innocent employees become collateral damage. And I had no intention of being buried beside Ethan Mercer. The next morning Ethan called me into another meeting. This time Kyle was already sitting there taking notes like an eager student. Ethan smiled. Daniel, I need you to prepare a complete transition document by Friday. I blinked slowly. A complete what? Everything. Client strategies, vendor contacts, forecast models, full operational structure, everything. He wanted me to hand over 11 years of intellectual survival. For free, I asked carefully, and after Friday? Ethan leaned back. We'll evaluate next steps. Cord. He wouldn't even say termination out loud. Kyle finally spoke. Honestly, man. I know this situation's awkward, but I really appreciate your professionalism. Professionalism. I almost laughed. He still thought this was a normal promotion. Poor kid. He had no idea he'd boarded a sinking ship. I spent the next 4 days pretending to cooperate. But secretly, I was building a timeline. And the timeline told a terrifying story. Over 18 months, Ethan and Richard had slowly moved company money through fake vendors connected to shell corporations. The transfers matched suspicious expense spikes. Even worse, some approvals used my department credentials. Which meant one thing: if this collapsed publicly, they could pin parts of it on me. That realization changed everything. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was survival. Friday arrived. Ethan gathered everyone for a departmental meeting. The fake smiles were unbearable. Then he announced it. Daniel will be stepping away from leadership responsibilities while we move into a new operational phase. Stepping away. People glanced at me nervously. Kyle sat beside him, trying not to look guilty. Then Ethan did something I'll never forget. He started taking credit for my work. Publicly. The systems we implemented over the years. The client growth strategy I designed. The vendor framework I introduced. Mind, every sentence was theft. And everyone in that room knew it. But nobody said anything, because offices run on fear, not truth. I looked around the conference table. Some people avoided eye contact. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked relieved it wasn't happening to them. That's corporate survival. People don't help. They just hope they're not next. Ethan finally turned toward me. Daniel, anything you'd like to say? I smiled. Actually, yes. The room froze. Even Ethan looked surprised. I stood up slowly. I just want everyone here to remember something. Silence. When people rush to erase someone who built everything, there's usually a reason they're in such a hurry. Ethan's smile disappeared instantly. Good. I grabbed my notebook and walked out. Behind me, the room stayed completely silent. That afternoon, my company access suddenly changed. Certain files restricted. Credentials limited. Meeting permissions removed. Panicked, they were moving faster now. Which meant they sensed danger. I spent the weekend organizing evidence. Every recording backed up 3 times. Every document encrypted. Every timeline cross-referenced. Then Monday morning, something unexpected happened. Kyle showed up at my apartment. Alone. He looked terrified. I think something's wrong, he said. I stared at him. You just figured that out? He swallowed hard. Then he pulled out printed financial statements. Ethan told me to approve these under your transition authority. I looked down. Fake vendor payments. Again. Only this time my digital signature had been inserted automatically. They were already framing me. Kyle's voice shook. I didn't sign anything, I swear. For the first time I realized something important. Kyle wasn't the enemy. He was bait. Young. Inexperienced. Manipulated, exactly the kind of employee executives sacrifice without hesitation. I asked quietly, "Do you trust Ethan?" Kyle laughed nervously. Not anymore. Good answer. I invited him inside. Then I played the recordings. All of them. The color drained from his face, especially when he heard Ethan say, "By the time anyone audits anything, I'll be gone." Kyle sat there speechless. "Oh my God," he whispered. I nodded. "Now you understand why they hired you." That night everything changed. Because now I had something even more dangerous than evidence. I had a witness. Kyle didn't sleep that night. I could tell every hour he paced across my living room like a man waiting for a prison sentence. At around 3 a.m. he finally stopped near the kitchen counter and looked at me. "What happens if this comes out?" I stared at the city lights outside my apartment window. Depends who controls the story first. That's the part people don't understand about corporate scandals. Truth matters less than timing. If Ethan reached legal first, I'd become the disgruntled former employee trying to sabotage leadership. If I moved too early without enough proof, they'd bury me under lawyers. And if I waited too long, they'd erase everything. Kyle rubbed his face nervously. Why would they risk this? They already make millions. I laughed quietly, because people like Ethan don't steal for survival. They steal because getting away with it becomes addictive. That sentence stayed in the room for a long time. By morning we had a plan. Not revenge. Protection. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, I wanted Ethan destroyed. Not fired, not embarrassed. Destroyed. I wanted him to feel the same helpless humiliation he forced onto everyone beneath him. The same cold panic, the same betrayal. And for the first time since that meeting in his office, I realized I could actually make it happen. The next week I returned to work pretending everything was normal. That part shocked Kyle the most. "How are you acting so calm?" "Because panic exposes you," and Ethan already thought he'd won. That was our advantage. The office atmosphere had changed completely by then. People treated me like a ghost. Happened without inviting me. Conversations stopped when I approached. Even security suddenly checked employee badges more aggressively. Fear was spreading. Good, fear makes arrogant people sloppy, and Ethan was getting sloppier every day. One afternoon he called me into his office again. This time he closed the door immediately, never a good sign. He sat down slowly and folded his hands together. "Daniel, there's concern about your attitude lately." I almost smiled. Classic corporate tactic: create the conflict, then document the reaction. I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of concern?" "People feel tension around you." "People, corporate cowards always hide behind imaginary groups." I nodded slowly. "Interesting." Ethan leaned forward. "Look, between us, I think it would be smart for you to resign gracefully." There it was, not because I failed, because I knew too much. I asked carefully, "And if I don't?" His eyes changed, just for a second, the mask slipped. "Then things could become unpleasant." Treat? Recorded beautiful. I looked directly at him. "You know what's funny, Ethan?" He stayed silent. "People always reveal themselves right before they panic." His jaw tightened instantly. "Good." I stood up and walked out before he could respond. That conversation confirmed something critical. They were scared. Which meant the financial investigation was closer than I thought. That evening Kyle forwarded me an internal email chain. He accidentally gained access to subject line: "Emergency compliance preparation." My heartbeat accelerated. An external audit team was arriving in 6 days. 6. Now everything made sense: the rushed transition, the pressure, the fake restructuring. They needed someone to blame before auditors arrived. And that someone was supposed to be me. I immediately called a lawyer. Not some billboard attorney. A federal employment specialist named Rachel Lawson. Former prosecutor, calm voice, terrifying reputation. The moment I mentioned internal fraud recordings, she stopped me. "Do not email anything. Do not upload anything. Do not confront anyone further. Don't tell them you're speaking to counsel." I listened. For the first time in weeks I finally felt something close to control. The next morning Rachel met me in a small office downtown. I brought everything: recordings, financial documents, timelines, backup drives. She spent nearly 3 hours reviewing evidence silently, then she leaned back slowly. "This is bigger than you think." Those 6 words changed the temperature of the room. "How big?" Rachel tapped one document. "If these transfers are real, multiple executives are exposed. Possibly securities fraud, wire fraud too." My stomach dropped. Multiple executives, meaning Ethan wasn't acting alone. Rachel continued. "And based on this timeline, they've probably been preparing to isolate liability onto lower management." "Lower management, me." "Kyle. Anyone disposable?" I asked quietly. "Can they do that?" Rachel looked directly at me. "Only if you stay silent." That afternoon she contacted federal investigators, not publicly. Quietly. And suddenly the game changed. Because once federal agencies become interested, panic spreads fast. Especially among rich executives who think money makes consequences optional. Over the next few days the office became chaos disguised as professionalism. Executives held emergency meetings behind closed doors. Accounting staff stayed late every night. Files disappeared. Servers updated unexpectedly. Ethan looked exhausted. For the first time since I'd known him. He stopped smiling. Then came Thursday, the day everything exploded. I arrived at work around 8:10 a.m. 3 black SUVs already sat outside the building, no company logos, just government plates. Employees entering the lobby looked confused. Scared. Whispering. I stepped inside calmly. Then I saw Ethan. And I will remember that expression for the rest of my life. Pure terror. Not stress. Not concerned terror. He was standing near reception arguing with 2 men in dark suits while pretending not to panic. One of them held a folder, the other held a warrant. People across the lobby pretended not to stare. But everyone stared, because powerful people never imagine consequences until they arrive publicly. Ethan noticed me. For a split second our eyes locked, and in that exact moment, he knew. He knew I didn't resign. He knew I didn't disappear. He knew I fought back. One of the investigators asked loudly, "Ethan Mercer?" The entire lobby went silent. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "We need immediate access to all financial systems and executive communication records." Boom! Panic detonated across the building instantly. Phones stopped ringing. People froze. Executives vanished into offices. Ethan tried to recover. "Of course, we fully intend to cooperate." Cooperate, amazing word coming from criminals. I walked past him slowly toward the elevators. Then Ethan grabbed my arm, hard, too hard. "What did you do?" There it was, no denial, no confusion, straight to guilt. I looked down at his hand, then back at him. "Careful, Ethan. People are watching." He released me immediately. Good choice. By noon the office looked like a funeral home. Investigators occupied conference rooms. IT systems locked down. Accounting staff interviewed individually. And suddenly everyone who ignored me for weeks started acting nervous around me, because people sensed the power shift. That's the ugly truth about offices. Most loyalty follows momentum. Around 2 p.m. Rachel called. "Do not discuss anything internally anymore. They're already turning on each other." Turning on each other, exactly what I wanted. Kyle later told me executives were blaming entire departments privately. Richard claimed Ethan controlled everything. Ethan blamed accounting. Accounting blamed software errors, cowards, every single one. Then Friday morning came, and with it, the leak. Somebody inside Disaptipany leaked news of the investigation to financial media. By 10 a.m. headlines were everywhere. Corporate fraud probe. Financial misconduct investigation. Executive misappropriation allegations. The company stock collapsed almost instantly. Phones rang non-stop. Clients panicked. Investors demanded answers. And Ethan? He disappeared, literally. No office. No calls. No emails. Gone until Saturday night. That's when he showed up outside my apartment, drunk, completely destroyed. I almost didn't recognize him. His expensive suit looked wrinkled. Eyes bloodshot. Hair messy. The king finally looked human. He knocked repeatedly until I opened the door halfway. "You ruined me," he whispered. No apology, no accountability, just self-pity. I stared at him quietly. "No, Ethan. You ruined yourself." He laughed bitterly. "You think they'll spare you?" I almost felt sorry for him then. Almost, because Ethan's at the edge of collapse. He still believed everyone operated like him, desperate. Corrupt. Self-serving, I replied calmly. Difference is, I prepared before the fire started. That sentence hit him hard. You could actually see the realization spreading across his face. I wasn't reacting emotionally. I'd been documenting him for months. He whispered quietly, "How long were you recording?" I smiled. "Long enough." He looked physically sick. Good. Then he said something that stunned me. "Richard started it." Of course. The first instinct of drowning criminals is always betrayal. He kept talking about offshore accounts, fake vendors, executive bonuses hidden as consulting payments. I realized something terrifying while listening. Ethan wasn't there to threaten me. He was there to negotiate survival. He wanted protection from the very people he once protected. I asked him one question. "Did you ever plan to blame me officially?" Silence. Then he looked away. That was enough. I closed the door. No speech. No dramatic ending. Just silence, because sometimes silence hurts more. Over the next month the company collapsed publicly. Executives resigned. Federal subpoenas expanded. News coverage intensified. Employees who once worshipped leadership suddenly acted shocked by corruption. Funny how morality appears after consequences. Kyle testified voluntarily. Rachel coordinated with investigators, and I finally slept properly for the first time in nearly a year. But the story still wasn't over, because revenge doesn't end when your enemy falls. It ends when you stop carrying them inside your head. And Ethan Mercer still lived there. One rainy afternoon nearly 7 months later, I received a message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "Please call me." Ethan. I ignored it. Then another message arrived. "I need help." That one made me laugh. The man who once controlled careers now sounded terrified through text. Hoar's later curiosity won. I called. He answered immediately, the confidence was gone. No polished executive voice. No arrogance, just exhaustion. They froze everything, he said quietly. Everything: homes, accounts, assets, reputation. Turns out the people who think they're untouchable collapse the hardest when reality finally reaches them. I asked calmly, "Why are you calling me?" Long silence, then he finally admitted it. "Because you were the only decent person there." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not because it felt good. Because it proved he understood exactly what he destroyed. He knew. He always knew. He knew who built the company. He knew who stayed loyal. He knew who solved every crisis, and he still chose greed. That's the thing about selfish people, they don't accidentally betray others. They calculate it. I asked one final question. "When you forced me to train Kyle, did you already know the investigation was coming?" Quiet breathing, then, "Yes." There it was, the truth. He planned everything: the humiliation, the replacement, the transition, the blame. All of it. I thanked him, then I hung up, and for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I finally felt free. A year later I started my own consulting firm, small at first, then larger, then bigger than I ever imagined. Now why? Because clients followed people they trusted, not titles, not executives, not fake leaders, people. Most of Ethan's former clients eventually left the ruins of the old company and joined me. Not because I advertised, because reputation survives longer than corruption. One evening Melissa from accounting visited my new office downtown. Real office this time. My office flowed to sailing windows. City skyline. Quiet confidence. She smiled and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping: federal sentencing scheduled for former executive Ethan Mercer. I stared at it silently. Then Melissa asked softly, "How does it feel?" I thought about that for a long moment: the anger, the humiliation, the revenge, the collapse. And honestly, the answer surprised even me. "Quiet," I said. "Because real victory doesn't scream, it doesn't need applause. The greatest revenge in the world is building a life so stable that the people who tried destroying you become irrelevant memories." Before leaving, Melissa stopped at the office door. "You know what everybody says now?" I looked up. She smiled. "They say Ethan picked the wrong person to betray." After she left I stood alone beside the windows overlooking the city. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Traffic lights blurred below, and for the first time in years, everything felt calm. Not because justice always wins, it doesn't. Sometimes, terrible people escape consequences forever. But this time the man who thought everyone was disposable finally discovered something priceless. The quiet employee he underestimated had been recording everything. And by the time he realized it, it was already too late.